Iran is preparing to charge fees for ships passing the Strait of Hormuz, a route that carries roughly 1/5 of global oil trade. This is Omni View, episode 156. Iranian officials have begun steps to impose fees on vessels transiting the strait. They cite Turkey's long-standing system of charges for passage through the Bosporus and Dardanelles as a workable precedent. The strait links the Persian Gulf to the open ocean and remains a vital corridor for oil tankers and other commercial shipping. Nikkei Asia reports the development as part of Iran's effort to generate revenue and assert control over a critical choke point. Regional analysts note that any fee system would require coordination with Oman, which shares the strait's southern shore. Shipping companies and energy importers have historically treated the strait as a free passage under long-standing custom. Iran frames the change as an exercise of sovereign rights similar to those exercised by Turkey. The proposal arrives amid broader tensions over energy markets and sanctions. Observers will watch whether Iran issues formal regulations and how Oman and major oil importers respond. Shifting now to Thailand. Violence has intensified in Thailand's southern provinces, with renewed attacks reported in areas long affected by separatist activity. The latest incidents have involved both armed clashes and civilian impacts in districts that have seen periodic unrest for years. Security forces have responded with increased patrols and operations. Local schools and markets have experienced disruptions as a result. Nikkei Asia describes the flare-up as the sharpest in recent months, involving both insurgent groups and security forces. Local communities have faced repeated cycles of violence that disrupt daily life and schooling. Thai authorities have maintained that development programs and dialogue remain central to their approach. Some residents question whether those measures address underlying grievances. The pattern of escalation and response has repeated across multiple administrations. International observers continue to monitor the human cost in the affected border regions. The government's next security and dialogue steps will be tracked by regional monitors. Next, a dispute in international sports governance. Uefa has initiated criminal proceedings against FIFA and its president Gianni Infantino over a failed plan to sell stakes in the World Cup. The action centers on governance questions surrounding the proposed commercial arrangement. European football officials have described the plan as contrary to established agreements. FIFA has not yet issued a detailed public response to the filing. The BBC reports that UEFA views the attempted sale as a breach of governance rules that harmed European football interests. FIFA maintains that its commercial decisions fall within its global mandate. European football bodies argue that the move protects the sport's traditional structures. FIFA frames its actions as necessary modernization. The dispute highlights differing views on how revenue from major tournaments should be allocated and controlled. UEFA's position rests on the claim that FIFA's commercial plans violated agreements that protect the integrity and revenue flows of European leagues and clubs. FIFA's position rests on the claim that it holds sole authority over the World Cup's commercial rights and that legal challenges from regional bodies undermine the sport's global unity. Courts will determine whether the case proceeds to formal hearings. In South Africa, domestic sugar producers are set to receive support through higher import duties. South Africa plans to raise the benchmark price used to calculate duties on imported sugar. The adjustment would increase the reference level against which import tariffs are assessed. Local growers, including units linked to Associated British Foods, have pressed for the change over several years. The move targets an industry that has seen declining output amid cheaper overseas supplies. Bloomberg reports the change will increase the cost of imported sugar and thereby support local growers. Industry groups argue the adjustment restores fairness after years of cheap imports. Consumer advocates note that higher duties could raise prices for households and food manufacturers. Domestic producers argue that the benchmark adjustment counters below-cost imports that have reduced local output and employment. Importers and some retailers argue that the higher benchmark will raise input costs across the food chain without addressing underlying productivity issues in local farming. The new benchmark level and its effect on import volumes will be monitored by the industry. The Bank of Korea has raised interest rates for the second consecutive meeting in response to rising inflation pressures. The decision follows earlier tightening measures aimed at containing price growth. Central bank statements have emphasized the need to safeguard household budgets from sustained cost increases. Commercial lenders are expected to pass on the higher rates to borrowers. Nikkei Asia notes that the central bank is acting to keep price increases from eroding household purchasing power. Businesses have expressed concern that higher borrowing costs could slow investment. The bank has stated that its decisions aim to maintain overall economic stability. The sequence of hikes reflects ongoing monitoring of consumer price data and external factors. Markets will watch the bank's next policy statement for signals on further moves. Meanwhile, the Philippines has increased interest rates to address inflation linked to higher energy costs, following developments involving Iran. The central bank cited imported price pressures from fuel and related commodities as a primary driver. The rate increase is intended to limit the pass-through of these costs into broader consumer prices. Officials have noted that the policy aims to anchor longer-term inflation expectations. Nikkei Asia reports the central bank's action as a direct response to imported price pressures. Households face higher costs for fuel and electricity. The bank has indicated that the move seeks to prevent broader price spirals. The decision aligns with similar steps taken by other central banks facing external energy shocks. Officials will assess whether additional adjustments are required. Now, some progress worth knowing about. Google, OpenAI, Meta, and TikTok have agreed to work with Japanese authorities on measures to detect and block online scams. The partnership includes commitments to share detection technologies and improve platform safeguards. Japanese regulators have outlined plans to update relevant rules in parallel with the technical cooperation. The initiative targets fraudulent schemes that have increased in volume across digital channels. Nikkei Asia reports the partnership as a concrete step to share detection tools and limit the spread of fraudulent schemes. The companies will provide technical support while Japan updates its regulatory framework. The collaboration addresses rising scam volumes that affect users across age groups. Early discussions have focused on real-time identification of suspicious content and accounts. The first joint detection systems are expected to be tested in the coming months. To really understand the Hormuz fee proposal, most coverage assumes that major shipping lanes are automatically free and open, yet coastal states have long held limited rights to regulate or charge for transit under specific conditions. The 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea distinguishes between transit passage through straits used for international navigation and the broader rights a country may exercise in its territorial waters. Turkey's long-standing Bosporus regime shows how a state can impose safety, environmental, and tonnage-based fees without closing the route, provided the charges remain reasonable and non-discriminatory. Iran's reference to this model suggests it is exploring a similar bounded approach rather than a blanket toll. Knowing this distinction helps separate routine regulatory updates from claims of sudden closure or blockade. When reports mention new fees, check whether the proposed charges apply only to safety services or extend to general revenue. Check also whether the opposite shore state has agreed to the framework. Historical examples from other straits demonstrate that gradual implementation and bilateral consultation often determine whether such systems gain acceptance. Observers tracking the Hormuz proposal can compare the specific fee structure once published against Turkey's published tariff schedules for comparable services. If you want to go deeper on today's lead story, compare how Nikkei Asia and Bloomberg frame economic policy changes in different regions. Tomorrow, watch for the first responses from Oman and major oil importers to Iran's proposed fee system. That wraps up today's Omni View. Remember, the best-informed people read more than one perspective, and the calmest ones know that most days, somewhere, something is quietly getting better. For full source links, check out today's written briefing on the Omni View summaries page. Share this with someone who values fair coverage. See you tomorrow. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nira Network. Links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the Nira Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets. Each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. SpaceX Daily, the daily companion for following SpaceX as a public company, from Starship to the stock ticker. Find every show free at niranetwork.com. The age of AI puts real builders on the phone with an AI host. Apply at neuronetwork.com, Age of AI apply. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.